It was a typical cold and rainy evening in Portland, Oregon. The kind of night where the clouds seem low enough to touch, and the rain taps rhythmically against the windows like an unrelenting drumbeat. For people like Jason Miller, who worked late shifts at the manufacturing plant on the outskirts of town, nights like these were part of the routine. At exactly 11:10 p.m., Jason found himself standing at the cracked bus stop on Elm Street, under the flickering neon sign that buzzed softly above him. The rain had been falling steadily for hours, soaking the city streets and turning them into glistening mirrors reflecting the few scattered streetlights. His coat was soaked, his boots splattered with mud from the puddles, and his breath came out in visible puffs of mist. The bus was late and he was growing impatient. Jason checked his phone, but the screen was dead. No signal, no battery, just black. He cursed softly under his breath. No way to call a cab, no way to let his wife know he'd be late. Just the cold, the rain, and the empty street. Then out of the foggy darkness he saw him. A man. Tall, thin, wearing a long black trench coat that seemed to swallow the dim light. His face was obscured beneath the brim of a dark hat, shadowed by the relentless rain. He appeared from the other side of the street, walking slowly but without a single splash of rain touching his coat or boots. Jason's skin crawled. There was something wrong. The man stopped under the street lamp, stepping into its sickly yellow light. His eyes were too pale, too glassy, almost like porcelain dolls, staring straight at Jason without blinking. Jason's heartbeat sped up. Waiting for the bus too? Jason called out, trying to break the silence. No answer. The stranger only tilted his head slightly, a slow, unnatural movement. Jason's voice caught in his throat. You okay? Still nothing. The rain pattered louder, drowning out the distant sounds of the city. But strangely, the area right around the stranger was eerily dry. No water dripped off his coat or hat. No drops hit the pavement near him. Jason took a small step back. Suddenly, a sharp crack of thunder split the sky, and the streetlights flickered. Jason glanced around nervously, but the stranger didn't move. Then, out of the corner of his eye, Jason noticed movement across the street. A woman. She was standing at the abandoned bus stop across from him, a place no one used anymore. The bus shelter was broken, glass shattered, weeds growing through the cracks. Yet she stood there, soaked to the bone, her long hair plastered against her face. Jason blinked and she was gone. His heart pounded. He took a deep breath and looked back at the stranger. The man had moved closer. His lips parted in a thin, unsettling smile. Jason's breath hitched. Bus is coming, the man whispered. Jason turned toward the road. A bus emerged from the fog, its headlights flickering, the engine barely making a sound. But something was off. There was no driver. The bus pulled up slowly, doors opening with a hiss. Jason's skin prickled. He looked back and the stranger was gone, vanished into thin air. Swallowing hard, Jason stepped onto the bus. Inside, the air was thick and stale, smelling of mold and rust. The seats were torn damp. Jason sat near the back, eyes scanning the empty rows. Then he noticed the other passengers. They all sat with their backs to him, perfectly still. Jason's heart pounded louder. One by one they slowly turned around. The woman from the street. Her eyes were empty, black voids, her mouth sewn shut. Jason screamed and tried to run to the front. No driver. Just an empty seat. The passengers stood and slowly approached him. The last thing Jason heard was a whisper. You shouldn't have looked behind you. Jason woke up the next morning. Alone. Drat. The rain had stopped. He was back at the bus stop under the flickering neon sign. His phone buzzed. A new message. He opened it. A photo. It showed him sitting inside the bus, surrounded by pale figures. And standing behind him, the stranger, smiling. It was the kind of night that made even the bravest people uneasy. A relentless rain hammered down on the small town of Ashford, Vermont, turning streets into rivers and sidewalks into slick sheets of glass. Thunder rumbled softly in the distance, and the occasional flash of lightning illuminated the thick gray clouds that hung low, smothering the moon and stars. Emma Reynolds sat in her cozy two-story house at the edge of town, wrapped in a worn blanket, staring out at the storm through a rain-streaked window. Freelance writer by day, insomniac by nature, she had spent most of the evening typing up her latest article. The flickering light of her desk lamp was the only thing keeping the darkness at bay. As the clock on the wall clicked over to 2:13 a.m., the silence was shattered by a slow, deliberate knocking at her front door. Knock, knock, knock. Emma's heart jumped into her throat. She froze, unsure whether to move or stay still. The rain pounded mercilessly, masking other sounds, but the knocking was unmistakable. She glanced at the door through the peephole, nothing but the empty porch soaked in rain. No shadow. No figure. Just the relentless storm. Her hands trembled as she stepped back. Then the knocking started again, this time at the back door. Emma's skin prickled with fear. There was no one supposed to be out in this weather. No friends, no neighbors. And yet, the knocking continued, slow and measured, echoing inside her small house. Trying to steady her nerves, Emma grabbed her phone and dialed 911. The dispatcher's calm voice was the only thing keeping her grounded as she explained what was happening. The operator promised a patrol would be sent, but with the storm, help might take a while. She hung up, clutching a kitchen knife she kept near the stove. The house seemed to close in on her. Every creak of the wooden floors, every drip of rain against the windows amplified in the heavy silence. Suddenly, at exactly 3:13 a.m., there was a knock, not on the door but at the window beside her couch. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She slowly turned, and her eyes widened in terror. Pressed against the glass was a pale face, wet, with dark strands of hair plastered against it. The eyes stared with an unnatural stillness, wide open but devoid of any warmth or life. Emma screamed, dropping the phone. The face vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. Her phone buzzed on the floor. A new text message. From an unknown number. Why won't you answer? The rain outside seemed to grow heavier, pounding the roof like a drumbeat of doom. Hour after hour, the knocking continued. At exactly 13 minutes past each hour, the sound echoed from some new place. Front door, back door, windows, even inside the house. Emma's nights blurred together. Sleep became impossible. Her mind spun with fear and exhaustion. Was it a ghost? A prank? Something far worse? At 4:13 a.m., the knocking came from inside her bedroom closet. Slow, heavy, relentless. Emma stared at the closet door, frozen in place. The knife shook in her hand. She forced herself to stand, each step measured and cautious. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the doorknob. The knocking stopped. Silence. Then the door creaked open on its own. A cold gust of air hit her face, carrying a faint, rotten smell. Inside the closet was pitch black, except for a pair of glowing eyes staring back at her. Emma stumbled backward, tripping over the rug. The eyes vanished. She scrambled to her feet and ran out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Her phone rang, this time a call from the unknown number. She answered, voice barely a whisper. Who is this? No answer. Then a whisper. You can't hide. The rest of the night was a nightmare. Emma barricaded herself in the living room, pulling curtains tight and locking every door and window. The knocking persisted, sometimes soft, sometimes frantic, always at 13 minutes past the hour. She tried to call a friend, but the storm had knocked out her cell signal. When dawn finally broke, the storm subsided. Emma's neighbors emerged, blinking against the sunlight. She told them what happened, but they looked at her like she was crazy. No one else had seen or heard anything. Emma's house was empty, no signs of forced entry, no footprints in the mud. Only the lingering feeling of dread, and the last message on her phone. I'll be back at 2:13 a.m. Emma moved out the next day. But every stormy night, when the rain taps against the window pane, she can't help but wonder, who, or what, is still knocking. The rain had been relentless all night, drumming on the roof of Mason Carter's old truck as he navigated the twisting roads of Ravenwood, Washington. Dense fog clung to the towering evergreens on either side of the highway, swallowing his headlights in thick gray curtains. He adjusted the wipers on the windshield, but they barely made a dent against the sheets of rain that blurred the world outside. After a long week working late in Seattle, Mason was finally heading home to the secluded family cabin tucked deep in the woods. The only light came from his dashboard and the intermittent flashes of distant lightning, casting eerie shadows across the forest. He could feel the weight of the storm pressing down on him, heavy, suffocating, and ominous. His phone buzzed beside him, a text from his sister Claire. Call me when you get in. Don't forget. Mason smiled weakly and typed back, almost there. But the feeling of unease didn't leave. Something about this night felt wrong. As he veered off the highway onto the narrow road leading to the cabin, his headlights caught a figure standing on the side, barely visible beneath a soaked, dark hood. She was soaked through, trembling, her thumbs sticking out in a desperate hitchhiking plea. Mason's heart pounded. It was late. It was pouring. No one should be out here. But the fear in her eyes pulled at him. He slowed, cracked the window. Need a ride? He called over the rain. She nodded silently and slipped into the passenger seat, the smell of damp pine and earth following her inside. Where you headed? Mason asked, trying to break the silence. Just down the road. Please? She whispered, voice shaking. Mason started the truck again, gripping the wheel tightly. The wipers beat a frantic rhythm as the rain pummeled the glass. Minutes passed with nothing but the sound of the storm and the tires against wet pavement. Mason stole glances at the woman. Her skin was pale, her eyes distant. She stared out into the darkness, barely breathing. Are you okay? He asked softly. Her head turned toward him slowly, eyes glazed but focused. I don't know, she said, barely audible. The storm seemed to grow louder, as if the night itself was pressing closer. Suddenly, the truck's radio crackled to life, filling the cabin with static. Then a faint voice, trembling and desperate, whispered, "Help me." Mason slammed on the brakes, heart racing. But when he looked over, the seat was empty. The woman had vanished. He spun around, eyes darting through the rain and fog. Nothing but darkness. Then his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered, voice shaky. Hello. A low whisper, chilling and hollow. Don't trust the road. The line went dead. Mason's grip tightened on the steering wheel. He started the truck and pushed forward, the road narrowing as dense fog curled around the trees. Up ahead, a rusted sign emerged from the gloom, Ravenwood Cemetery. He shivered. He hadn't planned to pass the cemetery. The radio crackled again, turn back. But Mason ignored the warnings, pressing deeper into the woods. Suddenly the engine sputtered and died. The truck rolled to a stop, the headlights flickering out, leaving Mason in blackness. He grabbed his phone, it was dead. The rain crashed louder, thunder roaring like a beast. From the fog a figure appeared. A woman dressed in tattered white, face pale and eyes hollow, glowing faintly in the darkness. She reached out a trembling hand. Mason stumbled back, heart pounding in his chest. Her voice was a haunting whisper, "You're too late." Suddenly the headlights flickered back on and the engine roared to life. Mason didn't hesitate. He floored the accelerator, the tires spinning as he sped away from the cemetery and back toward the cabin. Breathless and shaking, Mason finally pulled up to the worn wooden porch of his family cabin. The rain had slowed to a soft drizzle. Inside he found an old photograph tucked beneath a loose floorboard, the same woman from the road in the mist. On the back, a note was scrawled in faded ink, "Help me find peace." Mason sat alone, listening to the last drops of rain against the window, haunted by the night's ghostly visitors. And the thought that somewhere in the shadows of Ravenwood, the restless spirit still waits. The rain hadn't stopped, and neither had the unease in Amanda's chest. Even after fleeing Ravenwood and driving for miles, the echo of that final call haunted her like a melody she couldn't forget. The strange thing was her phone, once dead and drained after that mysterious call, had flickered back to life. It hadn't connected to any network or GPS, but it displayed a single haunting message. Call failed, Ravenwood Sheriff Department. Amanda tried to dismiss it as a glitch, a leftover trace from the nightmare she had narrowly escaped. But that wasn't all. Her lock screen had changed. Instead of her usual wallpaper, a blurry image had taken its place. An eerie photo of the Ravenwood Cemetery drenched in rain, and in the background, a vague silhouette of something standing in the fog. It hadn't been there before. Shaken, Amanda pulled into a rundown gas station just outside the next town. She wanted answers. The place looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s, neon sign flickering weakly. As she stepped inside, an elderly man behind the counter didn't even flinch. He just stared at her like he had been expecting her all along. "You came from Ravenwood, didn't you?" he asked calmly, eyes fixed. Amanda froze. "How do you know that?" The man pointed toward an old mirror on the wall, its surface cracked and stained, but faintly reflecting Amanda's image, and behind her, a second shape that wasn't there when she turned. "They always come back when the call doesn't finish," he said cryptically. Amanda's voice shook. "What call?" The man handed her a folded, yellowing paper with coordinates scribbled in faded ink. "The call never ended. You didn't hang up. That means it's still connected, and now, they know who you are." Amanda backed out of the gas station, muttering "he's insane" under her breath, but her phone began to buzz again. No number. No caller ID. Just an incoming call. She didn't answer. She drove. But no matter how far she tried to go, something was wrong. Every road curved back around, familiar signs pointed in impossible directions, and every clock she passed, on the dash in her watch at gas stations was stuck at 2:13 a.m., the same time she received that first chilling call. Her radio stations all fizzled with static, but every now and then she heard something beneath the noise, faint whispers, the sound of dripping water, and once, unmistakably, her own name. Amanda. Amanda. She finally stopped her car on a stretch of empty road, far from anything. Her phone buzzed again. Without thinking, she answered. The rain hissed on the other end of the line, followed by a dragging sound. Then she heard her own voice, whispering, distorted. Finish the call. Her heart pounded as the windows of the car fogged up instantly from the inside. The fog thickened until a handprint pressed against the glass beside her. She screamed, jumped out of the car, and ran into the darkness. The GPS on her phone, which hadn't worked in hours, suddenly lit up and redirected her to a place she thought she had left behind, Ravenwood Cemetery. With every step closer, the rain intensified. Amanda's shoes sank into the wet, muddy path leading to the cemetery gates, which creaked open slowly without her touching them. Her flashlight flickered, barely illuminating the moss-covered tombstones. The coordinates led her deep into the back of the graveyard to a collapsed family crypt. The stone above the arched entrance read Hawthorne, 1912. As she stepped inside, a cold wave of air enveloped her. The walls were damp and covered in strange, etched symbols, almost like claw marks. At the center stood an old rotary phone, its cord still intact, receiver swaying gently as if someone had just placed it down. She didn't want to touch it, but she had to. Her hand shook as she reached for it, and the moment she made contact, the phone rang. She didn't want to answer, but the sound was hypnotic. She picked up the receiver. A voice she didn't recognize, male and low, spoke on the other end. "Why didn't you finish the call?" Amanda whispered. "Who are you?" The voice ignored her question. "You were warned. The town let you leave, but the line stayed open. You didn't hang up. Now you're the bridge." "What bridge?" she asked. The phone sparked violently in her hand and her flashlight cut out. She was plunged into darkness. Then came the sound of bare feet on wet stone. She turned slowly. A woman stood at the back of the crypt. Soaked, eyes missing, jaw slack and open far too wide. She raised one hand and pointed at Amanda. Then others emerged behind her, pale, silent, with eyes hollowed out, whispering nonsense in unison. "You brought the signal back," the voice on the phone said. "Now, you're the call." Amanda dropped the receiver and bolted. The cemetery morphed around her, paths looping endlessly. No matter where she turned, she ended up back at the Hawthorne crypt. She tried to scream, but her voice cracked. Suddenly, headlights flashed in the distance. A ranger truck rolled into the cemetery's edge. Hope surged in her chest. A park ranger leaned out. "Are you okay?" Amanda sobbed and ran toward him, clambering into the truck without thinking. "Please get me out of here." The ranger gave her a small nod and started driving. For a while, Amanda allowed herself to believe it was over. But something was wrong. The dashboard didn't light up. The rearview mirror didn't reflect her. Instead, it showed the cemetery, like she had never left. And the man driving didn't have a reflection at all. Amanda's breath caught in her throat. "Where are we going?" she asked. The ranger finally turned to her, his face expressionless until he smiled. A long, unnatural smile that stretched too wide for a human mouth. "Back to where the line began." The truck kept driving, but the outside world faded into pitch black. 2 days later, Amanda's abandoned car was found by a highway patrol officer. It was parked neatly on the shoulder of an empty road. Headlights off. Windshield wipers still going. Her phone, shattered on the driver's seat, still displayed a single notification on its broken screen. Call connected. Ravenwood. Amanda herself was never seen again. But occasionally, especially during stormy nights, people across nearby towns report receiving strange phone calls. They say there's heavy static, breathing, and then a whisper. A woman's voice. Soft, desperate. Finish the call. But by then it's too late. The line is already open, and the rain is already falling.